stop, before you skip this, before your thumb moves to the next video, I need you to hear something that could completely change the trajectory of your life. And I mean that without a single drop of exaggeration. What if the gap between who you are right now and who you're desperately trying to become has nothing to do with your intelligence, nothing to do with your connections, your zip code, your past, or how many times you've already failed? What if the only thing standing between you and the life you keep imagining at 2 a.m., when the room is dark and the phone is in your hand and the doubts creep in like smoke, is one specific skill that almost nobody teaches you? Here it is: the ability to make your brain do hard things when every nerve in your body is screaming for something easy. Right now, as you listen to this, something fascinating is happening inside your skull. Your brain is already plotting its escape. It's scanning for a reason to pause, to multitask, to come back to this later. It's whispering that you already know this stuff, that you'll apply it when the timing is better, when life slows down a little, when you feel more ready. That whisper, that's not weakness. That's not laziness. That is pure ancient biology doing exactly what it was designed to do. And here's what makes this audiobook different from every other self-help experience you've had. We're not going to fight that biology. We're going to hijack it. The people who seem to operate on a different level, the ones who wake up before dawn, build companies from their kitchen tables, stay composed when everything's on fire, and somehow keep moving when everyone else has quit. They're not superhuman. They didn't win some genetic lottery. They figured out something specific about how the brain actually works, and they use that knowledge to rewrite their own operating system. By the time we reach the final chapter of this book, you will know exactly how to do the same. This isn't a motivation pep talk. Motivation is a sugar rush. It comes fast, spikes hard, and crashes before lunch. What you're about to learn is a structural approach, a rewiring process, a way of thinking and living that makes your brain produce results automatically, without white-knuckling every single decision of your day. You're going to learn the neuroscience of why you resist difficult things, the psychology of why you keep starting and stopping, and the specific actionable systems that the highest performers on the planet use to turn discipline from a daily battle into a daily default. Because the truth, the one that separates people who achieve extraordinary things from people who watch them do it, is this: everything you want exists on the other side of the hard things you keep avoiding. The only question is whether you'll train your brain to go there. Let's begin. The willpower trap and why it's keeping you stuck. Let me blow up one of the most dangerous myths you've ever been sold. You've been told by school, by culture, by every productivity guru who ever posted a morning routine, that the people at the top have something you don't. More willpower, more grit, some internal reservoir of self-control that allows them to push through discomfort while the rest of us cave at the first sign of resistance. That story is a lie. And as long as you believe it, you will keep failing in cycles you can't understand. Here's the actual science. Willpower is not a character trait. It is not a fixed quality that some people possess in abundance while others are born running on empty. Willpower is a consumable resource, finite, depletable, and directly tied to the decisions you've already made that day. The more choices you make, even small ones, the less willpower you have available for the ones that matter. This phenomenon has been studied in laboratory settings across 3 continents, and the results are remarkably consistent. Researchers call it decision fatigue. By the time most people reach the evening hours, their mental tank is running on fumes, which is precisely why the chips in the pantry feel irresistible at 9 p.m., even if you ate well all day. It's why you can execute flawlessly at work until 3 p.m. and then burn 2 hours on content you didn't even want to watch. Your brain is doing exactly what it's wired to do, defaulting to the easiest available path when resources run low. The people you admire for their discipline aren't grinding through this problem with more force. They've designed their lives so the problem barely shows up. They've systematically eliminated unnecessary decisions. They've automated the behaviors that matter. They've built environments that make the right choice so obvious, so frictionless that willpower becomes almost irrelevant. Consider the CEOs, athletes, and creators who operate at elite levels. Many of them wear the same type of outfit day after day, eat from the same rotation of meals, structure their mornings identically regardless of what's happening in the world. This isn't quirky behavior. It's a calculated system for preserving mental energy for decisions that actually move the needle. But there's a deeper layer here that most people miss entirely. Your brain isn't just conserving willpower when it pushes back against your goals. It's actively protecting your comfort zone, which it has been carefully constructing your entire life. When you tell yourself you're too burned out to exercise, too overwhelmed to focus, too drained to do the thing you know you should do, that is an honest self-assessment. That is your nervous system pulling the emergency brake. And the solution is not to somehow become a person who never feels that pull. The solution is to stop relying on willpower altogether. Think about the routines you execute without a second of hesitation. You brush your teeth without summoning motivation. You check your phone without needing encouragement. You drive the same route to the store without consulting a map. These behaviors feel effortless because they've been repeated so many times that your brain has converted them from deliberate choices into automatic programs. The entire strategy of this book, The Complete Framework, is about doing exactly that with the hard things in your life. Your brain runs on two operating systems. The first is fast, reactive, and emotional. It's the system that grabs your phone when boredom arrives, cancels the workout when the couch looks too good, and chooses the path of least resistance at every fork in the road. Neuroscientists call this System 1. It is ancient, powerful, and it never runs out of fuel. The second system is slow, deliberate, and rational. It sets the goals. It makes the plans. It knows exactly what you should do and exactly why. This is System 2. And it burns through energy like a jet engine, exhausted after a few hours of heavy use. Most people spend their entire lives trying to force System 2 to overpower System 1. They white-knuckle their way through the day, fighting impulses with logic until they have nothing left. The winning move is to program System 1 to work for you, to get the fast, automatic, emotional brain pulling in the same direction as your goals, so that doing the right thing stops being a battle and starts being a reflex. That is what the rest of this book will show you how to do. You are not going to become more disciplined by trying harder. You are going to become more disciplined by making discipline inevitable. Your brain is not broken, it's running. Ancient software. Here's something that will fundamentally change how you see yourself every time you struggle. Your brain is not broken. It is not weak. It is not working against you out of spite. It is running a program that was installed tens of thousands of years ago for an environment that no longer exists, and it is running that program flawlessly. For the overwhelming majority of human history, the behaviors most likely to keep you alive were simple. Avoid unfamiliar situations, conserve energy whenever possible, stay close to your group, and don't take risks that might end badly. The human beings who ventured too far from camp, who tried untested approaches, who pushed into unknown territory, without guarantee of safety. Many of them didn't survive long enough to pass their genes forward. The people who survived were the cautious ones, the ones who defaulted to safety, the ones whose brains were excellent at identifying threats and pulling them back from the edge. You are the descendant of those survivors. Your brain carries their programming every time you feel that invisible resistance when you're about to start something challenging. That vague sense of dread before a difficult conversation, that irrational heaviness before sitting down to do important work, that urgent desire to scroll or snack or find something easier to do. That is ancient survival software activating. It does not feel like fear. It feels like rationality. It sounds like, I'm not in the right headspace for this right now. Or I should research this more before I begin. Or I'll have better focus after I handle this other thing first. Or the classic, Monday is a better day to start. Your brain has become extraordinarily sophisticated at generating reasons that sound completely reasonable for avoiding anything that triggers discomfort. But here's what's actually happening at the neurological level. The moment you approach something challenging, even just thinking about it, a small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain called the amygdala activates. The amygdala is your brain's alarm system. It doesn't evaluate whether something is actually dangerous. It evaluates whether something is unfamiliar, uncertain, or uncomfortable. And to the amygdala, unfamiliar equals threat. When the amygdala fires, it triggers your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. Stress hormones flood your bloodstream. Your heart rate shifts. Your breathing tightens. Every signal your body sends says, retreat to safety. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the rational, goal-oriented, long-view part of your brain, is trying to override this alarm. It knows that going to the gym is good for you. It understands that finishing the project matters. It recognizes that the difficult conversation will strengthen the relationship. But the prefrontal cortex has a fatal weakness. It requires enormous metabolic resources to operate. It gets tired. And in a direct confrontation between your rational brain and your alarm system, the alarm system wins, especially when you're already stressed, tired, or depleted. This is not a flaw in your character. This is the architecture of the human brain. What makes this even more complex is that your brain doesn't just resist hard things in the moment. It learns to build resistance in advance. You feel the dread on Sunday evening before a challenging Monday. You feel the anxiety before an important presentation begins. Before you've even opened your mouth, your brain has identified the pattern. This situation leads to discomfort, and it starts the resistance process early, hoping to rout you away before you commit. This anticipatory resistance is particularly insidious because it operates beneath the level of conscious thought. You're not choosing to feel overwhelmed. You're not deciding to feel dread. The feeling arrives on its own, dressed up as common sense, and you follow it without questioning its source. Now, here is the extraordinary part. The same neural machinery that creates resistance can be reprogrammed to create drive. Your brain's neuroplasticity, its documented ability to build new connections and restructure existing pathways throughout your entire life, means that the resistance patterns you experience today are not permanent. They are not your destiny. They are learned responses, and learned responses can be unlearned and replaced. The three primary resistance patterns your brain deploys are worth naming precisely because naming them strips away their disguise. The first is procrastination, your brain's strategy for avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty or difficulty by creating the illusion of future commitment. I'll handle it later. Allows your brain to avoid action while maintaining the fiction that you're still a person who intends to do the thing. The second is perfectionism, your brain's strategy for avoiding the risk of judgment or failure by keeping you in perpetual preparation. You can't fail at something you never actually start. Perfectionism is procrastination wearing a productivity costume. The third is rationalization, your brain's most sophisticated tool, constructing genuinely compelling arguments for why your goal isn't that important. The timing isn't right, or a different path would be more strategic. This one is dangerous precisely because the reasoning often sounds legitimate. Recognizing these patterns as neurological defense mechanisms rather than rational assessments is the first step toward dismantling them. But recognition alone won't change anything. The next step is building a systematic replacement, a new operating system that works with your neurology instead of trying to muscle through it. The override system. Rewiring your mental operating system. Now that you understand why, your brain defaults to resistance. It's time to install the upgrade. This is not about developing the willpower to push through your brain's programming through sheer force. That approach is like trying to swim upstream every single day for the rest of your life. It works sometimes. It's exhausting always. And eventually the current wins. The approach we're taking is different. We're changing the direction of the current. Think of your current mental operating system as software that was written for a different era. Functional once, now outdated, running processes that consume resources without serving your actual objectives. A good software engineer doesn't fight outdated code with raw effort. They write better code. They update the system. That's exactly what you're about to learn how to do. The override system is built on three interconnected mechanisms: trigger modification, response replacement, and reward restructuring. Together, they don't just change what you do. They change what feels natural to you. They change what your brain automatically reaches for. Trigger modification starts with a simple but profound recognition. Your behavior is being directed by your environment at all times, most of it beneath your conscious awareness. The sight of your phone on the desk generates an almost automatic impulse to check it. The smell of coffee triggers a ritual. The view of a cluttered workspace creates a low-level friction that makes starting feel harder than it needs to be. Your environment is in constant, silent conversation with your nervous system. And right now, for most people, that conversation is pulling them away from what matters. The solution is not more self-control. The solution is environmental redesign. If you want to exercise consistently, you don't manufacture motivation every morning. You set out your workout gear the night before, visible and ready. You place your gym bag directly in front of the door so that leaving without it creates friction. You put your phone charger across the room from your bed so that getting up early becomes the path of least resistance. You've engineered a chain of environmental triggers that naturally leads toward exercise before your groggy brain has any chance to negotiate. If you want to read more, books appear in multiple locations: bedroom, kitchen counter, living room. The visual cue does work that motivation cannot sustain. If you want to do deep work, your workspace contains only what that work requires. The phone is in another room. The notifications are off. The environment is sending one signal. This space is for producing, not consuming. Every single object, arrangement, and design decision in your environment is either pulling you toward your goals or pulling you away from them. Environmental design is the process of making those forces work for you. Response replacement is the second mechanism, and it addresses the inevitable moment when environmental design isn't enough, when the resistance thought arises anyway. Here's the key insight. You cannot stop your brain from generating resistance thoughts. I don't feel like it. This is too hard. I'll handle this tomorrow. These thoughts will arrive. The question is what you do in the half second after they appear. Most people engage with these thoughts. They negotiate. They evaluate the thought's merits. They have an internal debate. And the resistance usually wins because it has home field advantage. The alternative is response scripts, predetermined, non-negotiable replies that you deploy automatically when resistance appears, before the negotiation can start. When your brain generates, "I don't feel like working out," your script fires immediately. Action first. Feeling follows. When it says, "This project is too big, and I don't know where to start," the script runs. One next step. That's the only decision required. When it whispers, "I deserve a break, I'll come back to this," the script replies, 10 more minutes, just 10. The power of these scripts isn't in the specific words, it's in the bypass. You're redirecting your attention from the feeling to the action before the emotional brain can run its full interference routine. Feelings are temporary. Behavior creates outcomes. Reward restructuring is the third mechanism and possibly the most powerful long-term lever you have. Your brain is a reward-seeking machine. It learns by tracking which behaviors produce dopamine, that neurochemical signal of pleasure and anticipation, and it continuously steers you toward those behaviors and away from everything else. Right now, your brain's reward map is calibrated by evolution and amplified by modern technology. Checking social media. Dopamine hit. Eating something sweet. Dopamine hit. Finishing an episode of a show. Dopamine hit. Starting a difficult project. Dopamine? Not immediately, not automatically. The reward is real, but it's delayed, and your brain, operating on ancient software, heavily discounts delayed rewards. This creates the fundamental conflict at the heart of every discipline struggle you've ever experienced. Reward restructuring closes the gap by creating immediate, genuine dopamine responses for challenging behaviors. Not fake enthusiasm, not forced positivity. Deliberately engineered micro-rewards that train your brain to associate difficulty with pleasure. You finish a hard workout. You take 30 seconds to feel genuinely proud of yourself, not just move to the next task. You complete a difficult work session. You celebrate in whatever small way creates a real positive feeling. You push through resistance in a meaningful moment. You acknowledge it consciously, immediately, with a real internal signal of victory. Over time, this rewiring produces something remarkable. Your brain starts to anticipate the reward that comes after challenging behaviors, which means it starts to generate motivation to pursue those behaviors rather than avoid them. The challenge that once triggered resistance begins to trigger something that feels more like excitement. Accompanying these three mechanisms is a tool that neuroscientists call implementation intentions. If-then plans that automate your responses to specific situations before you encounter them. Most people attempt to make good decisions in real time. This is a mistake. Real-time decision-making happens when your emotional brain has maximum influence and your rational brain is managing 10 other things simultaneously. Implementation intentions transfer the decision-making to a calmer moment in advance. If I feel like skipping my workout, then I'll put on my gear and commit to 5 minutes only. If I feel overwhelmed by the project, then I'll open the document and write one sentence. If I want to reach for my phone during work time, then I'll write down the 3 most important things left to finish first. These plans don't require willpower in the moment because the decision has already been made. The if-then structure converts a resistance scenario into a re-triggered automatic behavior. Your emotional brain never gets to run the negotiation. The final component is progressive loading. the systematic process of increasing the difficulty of your challenges over time as your brain adapts to each level. The brain builds tolerance to discomfort the same way the body builds strength, through progressive, manageable increases in challenge. You don't begin a strength program with maximum weight. You begin with weight that challenges you without defeating you. Then increase it as your capacity grows. Mental training operates identically. You begin with 5-minute work sessions and build toward 90-minute deep focus blocks. You begin with minor uncomfortable conversations and build toward the most difficult ones. Each level of challenge becomes your new baseline, the starting point for the next evolution. The compound result over months and years is a mind that genuinely finds challenge comfortable. Not just tolerable, comfortable, even compelling. Environmental programming, building a world that works for you. Here is a truth that most people haven't fully absorbed. You are not primarily a creature of decision. You are primarily a creature of environment. The majority of your daily behaviors, the things you eat, the way you spend your first hour awake, the level of productivity you achieve, the habits you maintain or abandon, are not the product of daily decisions made by your conscious mind. They are the product of environmental signals that your brain has learned to follow automatically. Walk into a bakery and suddenly you want something sweet. Step into a library and your voice drops and your pace slows. Open your social media app and 30 minutes vanish before a single conscious choice was made. Your environment is running your behavior in the background, constantly below the threshold of awareness. Elite performers understand this at a structural level. They don't rely on daily willpower to overcome resistant environments. They engineer their environments to produce the behaviors they want, automatically, repeatedly, without conscious effort required. You can do the same, starting today. The first principle is visual priming. Your brain processes visual information faster than any other sensory input. What is visible in your environment immediately influences your thoughts, mood, and behavior, often before a single conscious thought is formed. If junk food is in plain sight, you'll consume more of it. If your phone is on your desk, your ability to focus drops, not just when you check it, but simply because it's visible. If your workspace is chaotic, you'll feel mentally scattered before you begin. The inverse is equally true. If your workout equipment is visible in your home, you'll use it more frequently. If healthy food is at eye level in your refrigerator, you'll choose it without effort. If your most important project is the first thing you see when you open your laptop, your brain immediately begins orienting toward it. Design your environment so that the visual cues pointing toward your goals are prominent and unavoidable. Design it so that the visual cues pulling you away are out of sight, out of reach, or gone entirely. The second principle is friction engineering. Your brain gravitates, without exception, toward the path of least resistance. This is not a flaw to overcome. This is a law of cognitive behavior to exploit. Increase the friction between yourself and behaviors that undermine your goals. Decrease the friction between yourself and the behaviors that advance them. Want to eat better? Meal prep on Sundays so the right choice is already made when hunger arrives. Want to use your phone less? Delete the apps that consume the most time. Not silenced, deleted. The extra step of reinstalling creates just enough friction to interrupt the automatic loop. Want to start your morning with intention? Set up your journal, your water bottle, and your priority sheet the night before, visible and ready. Want to stop watching television until midnight? Move the TV out of your bedroom. The bedroom's only job is sleep and recovery. The moment a screen enters that space, your brain begins receiving contradictory signals. Friction engineering works because it doesn't ask you to be disciplined in the moment. It asks you to make one deliberate environmental decision that handles hundreds of future impulse decisions automatically. The third principle is context stacking. This is about using the habits you already have, the automatic, deeply grooved behaviors that require zero willpower, as launching pads for the new behaviors you want to build. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. When you consistently perform behavior B immediately after behavior A, your brain begins to treat A as the trigger for B. Eventually, completing A automatically cues B without any conscious decision. This is how you attach new disciplines to existing routines without fighting for real estate in your daily schedule. If you already make coffee every morning, stack your new habit immediately after. After I pour my coffee, I sit down and write for 15 minutes before I touch my phone. The coffee ritual becomes the trigger. The writing becomes the automatic response. If you already change out of work clothes when you get home, stack your workout immediately after. When I change out of my work clothes, I put on my gym clothes instead. The act of changing becomes the launching mechanism. Context stacking works because it borrows momentum from existing habits, rather than trying to generate fresh momentum from scratch, which is the part that always burns people out. The fourth principle is environmental restriction. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply remove the option. This is different from relying on willpower to resist temptation. This is removing the temptation from your environment so that your brain cannot choose it even when it wants to. If you cannot stop eating the ice cream, don't have ice cream in your house. This is not deprivation. This is one difficult decision that eliminates 1,000 smaller ones. If you cannot stop falling into social media during work sessions, use a website blocker during your most important hours. Not discipline, architecture. If you cannot, stop staying up too late in front of a screen. Remove the screen from the space where you sleep. Make the unhealthy choice structurally unavailable. Environmental restriction is powerful precisely because it eliminates the decision entirely. Your brain cannot choose what does not exist in its immediate environment. The fifth principle is social environmental design. Of all the environmental factors that shape your behavior, the people around you are the most powerful. If your immediate social environment consists primarily of people who avoid difficulty, justify mediocrity, and treat ambition as a personality flaw, their behavior becomes your normal. Their ceiling becomes your default. If your social environment consists of people who are doing hard things, holding each other accountable, and treating growth as a fundamental value, that becomes the water you swim in. Their standards elevate yours by proximity. This means being genuinely intentional about who you spend your most important hours with, both in person and virtually. The content you consume, the communities you participate in, the voices you allow regular access to your attention, all of it is shaping your sense of what is normal and possible. Find communities where the behavior you want to build is already the default. Find accountability partners who will not accept your excuses because they respect your potential too much. Consume content from people who are modeling the mindset you want to inhabit. You do not need to overhaul your entire social life overnight, but you do need to be honest about whether your current environment is pulling you toward the person you want to become or away from them. The sixth principle is temporal design. Time, like space, can be engineered to support performance. Most people leave their schedule open, a blank canvas of hours that their reactive brain fills with whatever feels most manageable in the moment. The result is perpetual busyness without proportional progress. Elite performers treat time like real estate. They pre-assign their most important behaviors to specific time slots and protect those assignments with the same seriousness they'd give a meeting with someone who holds their future in their hands. Your workouts are on the calendar, not "I'll try to get to them." On the calendar, blocked, non-negotiable. Your deep work sessions are scheduled before you wake up on Monday morning, so the question of when is already answered. Your most cognitively demanding tasks are placed in the windows when your brain is sharpest, not squeezed into whatever time is left after the day runs its course. Temporal design removes the friction of deciding when. When the decision is already made, your brain stops generating reasons to delay. You simply do what the schedule says, which is what you, at your most rational, already decided you should do. Mental leverage, the multiplier. Most people never use. Here's a reframe that changes everything. Most people approach the discipline problem as a pushing problem. They're trying to push themselves through resistance, push themselves out of bed, push themselves to start the project, push themselves to make the hard choice. Push, 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 until they're too exhausted to push anymore, and the resistance wins. What if the solution isn't pushing harder? What if it's pulling smarter? This is the principle of mental leverage, using specific psychological techniques that multiply your effectiveness without multiplying your effort. Like a physical lever, these tools don't make you stronger. They change the mechanical relationship between your effort and your output. Pain, pleasure. Repositioning is the first lever, and it directly addresses the neurological root of resistance. Your brain has spent years building an association between challenging activities and negative feelings. Hard work equals stress. Discipline equals deprivation. Difficult conversations equal anxiety. Pushing your limits equals exhaustion. These associations are learned. They are wired through repetition. And because they are wired, they can be rewired. The process is not complicated. It requires consistency and intention. Every time you engage in something difficult, you deliberately, consciously direct your attention toward the positive dimension of the experience, not fake positivity, not self-deception. You genuinely focus on what is true and valuable about this hard thing you're doing, instead of, "This is brutal. I want this to end." You practice, "This discomfort means I'm growing. This is where the version of me I want to become is being built." Instead of fixating on the unpleasant sensations during a demanding workout, you focus on the strength accumulating in your body. Instead of dreading the difficult project, you focus on the capability being developed through your engagement with it. Over months of consistent practice, your neural pathways actually restructure. The association between challenge and negativity weakens. A new association between challenge and meaning, between difficulty and growth, takes its place. The feelings don't disappear, but their signal changes. Future self-visualization is the second lever, and it taps directly into your brain's most powerful processing system. Abstract goals live in your prefrontal cortex. Lose 30 pounds. Build the business. Get healthy. These are concepts. They lack sensory reality, and your brain cannot fully commit to pursuing something it cannot vividly experience. What does create neurological commitment is vivid, emotionally charged sensory imagery. Your brain treats a detailed, emotionally engaged visualization as nearly equivalent to actual experience. The same neural circuitry activates. So the practice is this: regularly create detailed, multi-sensory visualizations of the person you are becoming. Not vague, specific. See yourself walking into a meeting with a physical ease and confidence you've never felt before. Hear your voice, steady, clear, unhesitant. Feel the specific texture of the clothes you're wearing, the weight of your own presence in the room. Feel the energy in your body after months of consistent training. See the specific lifestyle your discipline has created, not as fantasy, but as a concrete preview. The more real this future self feels, the more your present behavior will naturally align with becoming that person. Your brain doesn't just want goals. It wants a vivid, believable destination. Identity-based leverage is the third and most structurally powerful technique in this chapter. Your behavior will always eventually match your identity. Always. The most powerful long-term lever available to any human being is not a better system or a stronger habit. It is a deeper shift in who they believe themselves to be. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with consistency, your brain will generate behavior that confirms that belief, not out of malice, out of its powerful drive for self-consistency. The brain works tirelessly to prove its own narrative correct. The shift required is this: you stop framing discipline as something you do and start experiencing it as something you are. Not, I'm trying to work out more. Instead, I am someone who takes care of their body. Not, I'm trying to be more productive. Instead, I am someone who executes on what matters. Not, I should probably get better at this. Instead, this is who I am, and this is what people like me do. This identity adoption may feel false at first. That's normal. Identities are built through accumulated evidence, through repeated actions that confirm the story. Every time you act in alignment with your chosen identity, you deposit evidence into the bank. Over time, the identity stops feeling like a costume and starts feeling like your actual skin. Systems thinking leverage is the fourth technique, and it solves the problem of overwhelm. Your brain gets paralyzed by large, distant goals. The abstract enormity of a major objective triggers the same alarm system that causes resistance, because it cannot see a clear path from here to there, and uncertainty equals threat. The solution is to stop focusing on outcomes and start focusing on processes. Not, I need to completely transform my health. Instead, what is the one best choice I can make at this next meal? Not, I need to build a successful business. Instead, what is the single next action on my priority list? Your brain can handle small, clear, immediate tasks without triggering resistance. And small tasks applied consistently over time generate massive results. Systems thinking is leverage because it keeps your mental energy focused on the level where action is actually possible. Now, while the larger objective takes care of itself through accumulated execution. Social leverage is the fifth technique, and it uses one of the oldest and most powerful drives in human psychology. Your brain is intensely calibrated to your social environment. It cares deeply, almost obsessively, about how others perceive you and whether you are meeting the expectations of the people whose opinions matter to you. This drive is ancient and incredibly strong, stronger than most individual motivations, and it can be redirected in your favor. Make public commitments. Announce what you're building. Tell people who matter to you what you are working toward and when you will complete it. Your brain's fierce commitment to social consistency will generate effort to meet those expectations even when your motivation is completely absent. Find accountability partners who hold you to your stated commitments, not gently but genuinely. People who will ask the direct question, did you do what you said you would do? And who will not let you slide on the answer. Join communities where the behavior you want to build is the norm. When your peer group exercises regularly, creates consistently, and holds high standards, the social pressure runs in your favor for once. Temporal leverage is the sixth technique, and it's about working with your brain's biological rhythms rather than ignoring them. Your cognitive capacity is not constant throughout the day. It follows a rhythm, peaking, plateauing, and declining in patterns shaped by your circadian biology, your sleep quality, your nutrition, and your stress levels. Most high performers experience their peak mental clarity within the first few hours after waking, before the day's decisions, interruptions, and social demands have depleted their resources. This is the window where complex thinking, important decisions, and meaningful creative work should happen. Yet, most people squander this peak window on low-value inputs, checking messages, scrolling, responding reactively to other people's priorities. Temporal leverage means aggressively protecting your peak cognitive hours for the work that matters most. Schedule your hardest, most important tasks for the top of your day. Save email, calls, administrative tasks, and passive activities for the hours when your brain operates well below peak. This one structural adjustment, protecting your biological prime time, can double your meaningful output without adding a single additional hour to your day. The execution engine, turning intention into action. Here is a reality check that most personal development content carefully avoids. The vast majority of people who consume self-improvement content, who read the books, listen to the podcasts, watch the videos, take the courses, never implement what they learn. Not because they lack intelligence, not because the information is flawed, because they have confused the act of consuming information with the act of executing on it. Preparation without execution is just procrastination wearing a more respectable outfit. The highest achievers understand something the rest of the population hasn't absorbed. Execution is the entire game. Everything else is rehearsal. The reason execution is so difficult isn't a moral failing. It's a structural one. Most people are relying on motivation and willpower to bridge the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. But motivation is a visitor, not a resident. It arrives unpredictably and leaves without notice. Willpower depletes and fails under pressure. What fills the gap is an execution engine, a structured system that makes action automatic regardless of how you feel, what obstacles appear, or how motivated you happen to be on any given morning. The execution engine runs on 3 fuel sources: immediate action bias, progressive momentum, and non-negotiable anchors. Immediate action bias is the default orientation toward beginning rather than analyzing. When you encounter something that needs doing, the habitual question becomes, how quickly can I take the first step? Not, should I do this? Or is this the right time? Or what's the perfect way to approach this? The analytical delay between intention and action is where resistance lives. The longer the gap between deciding to do something and actually starting it, the more time your brain has to generate compelling reasons not to. The 5-minute rule is the most reliable implementation of immediate action bias. When resistance is high and the task feels heavy, you commit to exactly 5 minutes. Nothing more. Just 5 minutes of genuine engagement. This works because your brain's resistance is primarily directed at the starting of difficult things, not at the continuation of them. Once momentum is established, once the project is open, the weights are in your hands. The document is on the screen. Your brain's natural inertia shifts from resisting to continuing. 5 minutes launches the momentum. Momentum carries you forward. The hardest part is always the start. Progressive momentum builds on this by constructing deliberate chains of small wins that generate forward psychological energy. Your brain responds to forward movement. Each small completion sends a signal. This is working. More of this. That signal produces motivation, which makes the next step easier, which generates another win, which produces more motivation. Momentum is not something you wait for. It is something you architect, starting with the smallest possible action that genuinely moves you forward, then building on each completion. This is why clearing your desk before beginning work matters. Why? Making your bed in the morning has genuine downstream effects on the rest of your day. These micro-completions are priming your brain's momentum system, signaling that today is a day when things get done. Non-negotiable anchors are the third fuel source, and they represent the firmest structural element in your execution architecture. A non-negotiable anchor is a behavior so deeply embedded in your identity and schedule that it happens regardless of circumstances. Not most days, not when conditions are good, regardless. I never miss 2 consecutive days of exercise. My most important work happens before I open email or social platforms. I don't make significant decisions when I'm in an emotional state. Non-negotiables work because they eliminate the daily decision entirely. There is no negotiation with a rule that doesn't negotiate. Your brain cannot rationalize its way out of something you've pre-decided is non-negotiable. The key is to choose your non-negotiables carefully. 2 to 5 behaviors that, if executed consistently, would compound into extraordinary results over a year. Then protect those anchors with the seriousness of sacred commitments. Alongside these 3 fuel sources, the execution engine requires what I call accountability architecture, external structures that raise the cost of not executing. This might mean making your commitments public so your reputation is genuinely on the line. It might mean making a financial bet with someone you respect, money you'll lose if you don't follow through. It might mean working with a coach, a mentor, or an accountability partner who genuinely expects you to do what you say. The human brain performs differently when others are watching. When the cost of not executing is social consequence, financial consequence, or relational consequence, your brain automatically generates more energy to overcome resistance and follow through. The goal of accountability architecture is to make the discomfort of not executing consistently greater than the discomfort of executing. When that tipping point is reached, execution becomes the path of least resistance. Deep focus mastery, the superpower of our distracted era. In an economy increasingly built on the ability to produce creative, complex, valuable work, there is one skill that has become so rare it functions almost as a superpower. The ability to focus deeply, for extended periods, on what matters most. This is not a natural ability that some people have and others lack. It is a trainable capacity, one that becomes stronger with practice and weaker with neglect. And in the current environment where the average American checks their phone over 150 times per day, and the average focus span before self-interruption is under 11 minutes, most people's focus capacity is severely atrophied. Your brain has been trained to demand constant stimulation. Every notification, every feed refresh, every quick scroll has deposited a neurological expectation into your attention system. Variety should come fast, and if it doesn't, go find it. Deep, sustained focus on a single thing feels uncomfortable, precisely because your brain has been conditioned to experience discomfort during periods of low stimulation. Breaking this pattern requires understanding how deep focus actually functions and why most people never reach it. Deep focus is not a switch. It is a state that your brain enters gradually, typically requiring 15 to 20 minutes of sustained uninterrupted concentration before you reach the level where complex thinking, genuine insight, and creative breakthroughs become accessible. Most people interrupt themselves before that threshold, which means they are perpetually working at the surface of their cognitive capability. The first requirement for deep focus is radical external elimination. Not just silencing your phone, removing it from the room entirely. Not just closing unnecessary browser tabs, using a blocker that makes them inaccessible. Not just intending to avoid interruptions, making interruption structurally impossible for a defined period. This feels extreme to most people. It feels like overkill. But the research on attention residue shows that even brief interruptions, a glance at a message, a 3-second check of a notification, leave cognitive traces that contaminate your concentration for many minutes afterward. The cost of a 2-second distraction is not 2 seconds. It is 10 to 20 minutes of compromised focus quality. Deep focus requires protection at a level most people have never attempted. Once external distractions are eliminated, the next challenge is internal. The constant stream of thoughts, worries, planning fragments, and random mental associations that arise during any serious focus attempt. These are not a sign that you lack the capacity for focus. They are normal neurological activity. They are the mind doing what minds do when they are not being directed. The attention anchor technique provides the solution. An attention anchor is a predetermined point of focus that you return to whenever your mind wanders, and it will wander. The anchor might be a specific phrase you repeat internally, a physical sensation you maintain awareness of, or even a rhythmic pattern in your breathing. When you notice your mind has drifted, you don't fight the drift, judge yourself for drifting, or try to force your way back. You simply notice the drift and return to the anchor. Clean, no drama, back to work. This process, noticing distraction and returning attention, is the actual training. Like a bicep curl, each repetition builds the muscle. The goal is not to eliminate mind wandering. That is not achievable. The goal is to notice it quickly and redirect efficiently. That is extremely trainable. Progressive focus training applies the same incremental loading principle we discussed in the context of habit formation. You do not begin your focus training with 4-hour deep work blocks. You begin with periods that feel genuinely challenging but manageable, 15, 20, 25 minutes, and you build the duration as your focus endurance develops. The key calibration. During a focus session, your brain should feel the cognitive equivalent of mild muscle strain during exercise. Slight difficulty, slight effort, not overwhelming, not effortless. The optimal zone is where you are being challenged without being defeated. Attention residue management is a concept that dramatically changes how most people structure their workday. When you move from one task to another, part of your attention remains mentally engaged with the previous task. This residue reduces your cognitive capacity for whatever comes next. The heavier the previous task, the more residue it leaves. This means that the sequence of your work matters as much as the work itself. Moving from a demanding creative project directly into a complex analytical problem means you're starting that problem with partial cognitive resources. Deep focus requires adequate recovery time between demanding sessions, a brief period of genuine cognitive rest before moving into the next high-demand task. Checking email between focus sessions is not recovery. It's loading new cognitive residue onto existing residue. True recovery is a walk, a few minutes of genuine stillness, a brief physical movement that allows your mind to partially clear before you re-engage. Finally, deep focus is inseparable from your physical state. Sleep quality, nutrition, hydration, and stress load all directly affect your brain's capacity for sustained concentration. Elite performers treat their physical maintenance not as lifestyle preference, but as performance infrastructure. A brain running on 5 hours of sleep, high sugar inputs, and chronic stress cannot focus deeply regardless of motivation or system design. The hardware must be maintained. Habit architecture. Building the automatic life. Every single thing you are today is the product of repeated behaviors, not your intentions, not your beliefs about yourself, not your potential, your behaviors. specifically the ones you have repeated so consistently that your brain has automated them and made them part of your daily default. Everything you will become tomorrow will be determined by the behaviors you begin building today. This is simultaneously the most empowering and the most clarifying truth in human psychology. It is empowering because it means that deliberate, consistent action, regardless of talent or circumstance, creates real change. It is clarifying because it strips away every excuse that places the source of your outcomes somewhere outside your repeated choices. Most people approach habit change with the wrong model entirely. They try to build habits by relying on motivation to sustain new behaviors until they stick. They start with ambitious commitments, maintain them on the power of novelty and initial enthusiasm, then watch them collapse the moment life creates friction. The neuroscience of habit formation reveals exactly why this approach fails and exactly what to do instead. Every habit exists as a three-part loop: cue to routine to reward. A trigger in your environment or mental state signals your brain to initiate an automatic behavior sequence. The behavior runs. Some form of reward reinforces the pattern, making it more likely to run again the next time the cue appears. To build a habit that sticks permanently, you must engineer all three elements of the loop, not just the behavior. The most important principle in habit formation is minimum effective dose, making your initial habit commitment so small that your brain literally cannot generate meaningful resistance to it. If you want to exercise, don't commit to daily workouts. Commit to putting on your workout shoes. That's it. The bar is so low it cannot be failed. If you want to write, don't commit to 1,000 words. Commit to opening the document and writing one sentence. 1. If you want to meditate, don't commit to a 20-minute practice. Commit to sitting with your eyes closed for 60 seconds. These commitments sound laughably small. They are supposed to. The purpose of minimum effective dose is not to produce large results immediately. It is to bypass your brain's resistance mechanism, establish the behavioral pattern, and allow momentum to generate expansion naturally. And here's what the research consistently shows. Once you start, you almost always do more than your minimum commitment. The starting is what your brain resists. Once you are in motion, the motion tends to continue. Each successful completion also creates a critical psychological outcome. It proves to your brain that you are the kind of person who does this behavior. And that identity evidence accumulates. Over time, the behavior doesn't feel like something you're forcing yourself to do. It feels like something you naturally do because of who you are. Habit stacking remains the most reliable technique for installing new behaviors without fighting your existing schedule for space. Your current daily life contains numerous deeply grooved automatic routines, behaviors that run without any conscious decision or effort. Morning coffee, post-work transition rituals, bedtime sequences. These behaviors are like deep rivers in your neural landscape. By consistently placing your new habit immediately after an existing strong habit, you borrow the current of that existing river. The existing behavior becomes a trigger. The new behavior becomes the automatic response. When I pour my morning coffee, I immediately open my journal. When I change out of my work clothes, I put on gym clothes. When I get into bed, I read for 15 minutes before reaching for my phone. The critical requirement is immediacy and consistency. The new behavior must follow the trigger habit immediately, and this pairing must occur consistently enough for the association to become automatic, typically between 30 and 60 repetitions for simple behaviors. Environmental habit support is the architectural dimension of habit formation. Your environment must actively support the behaviors you're trying to build. Habits that require you to overcome environmental friction will fail when your motivation is low. Habits that your environment naturally supports will execute even on your worst days. Make good habits obvious, visible, easy to begin. Place your running shoes where you cannot miss them. Keep your water bottle in constant sight. Put the book on your pillow. Let your environment do the cueing. Make problematic habits invisible, difficult to access, requiring extra steps. The candy is not in your house. The social apps require extra steps to open. The television requires a deliberate choice to turn on, rather than being the default background state. Habit tracking provides the reward element that seals the neurological loop. Your brain needs clear, immediate feedback that the behavior is happening and counting. The simplest tracking systems are the most sustainable. An X on a physical calendar, a check in a small notebook, a mark in a simple app. The visual representation of your streak creates two powerful motivational forces: the dopamine reward of completing a mark and the loss aversion of not breaking a chain you've built. Don't break the chain is not a cliché. It is a neurological reality. Once you have 7 consecutive marks, the psychological cost of breaking the streak becomes a genuine deterrent. Once you have 30, it becomes significant. Once you have 90, the habit is largely automated. Identity-based habit formation is the deepest level, and it is where permanent transformation occurs. External tracking and environmental design are supports. The foundation is identity. You will naturally and automatically do what the person you believe yourself to be does. Period. There is no system strong enough to override a fundamental belief about who you are, indefinitely. The work of permanent habit change is ultimately the work of becoming a different person, not improving a behavior, changing an identity. I am not trying to run more. I am a runner. I'm not trying to eat better. I am someone who treats their body as a high-performance system. I am not trying to be more disciplined. Discipline is what I do because of who I am. The language sounds subtle. The effect is profound. The more consistently you act in alignment with a chosen identity, the more real that identity becomes to your subconscious mind. And once your subconscious accepts an identity as true, it generates behavior to confirm it, automatically without effort, for the rest of your life. Mental resilience, building the mind that bends but never breaks. Mental toughness is not a personality trait distributed randomly at birth. It is not something you either have or you don't. It is a trainable capacity, built through deliberate exposure to progressively challenging conditions, systematically developed the same way physical strength is developed. Here is the central paradox that most people never work through. The more consistently you avoid discomfort, the weaker your ability to handle discomfort becomes. Avoidance doesn't protect you from difficulty. It progressively destroys your capacity to meet it. Every time you route around an uncomfortable situation, your brain records the decision. This was too dangerous to engage. The next time you encounter something similar, the resistance arrives earlier and feels stronger. The avoidance patterns become grooved. The comfort zone shrinks. The path out of this is systematic, deliberate exposure, controlled doses of challenge and discomfort that teach your brain a new truth. I can handle this. I am okay. The discomfort does not break me. This process is called stress inoculation, and it is used by elite military units, emergency responders, and professional athletes to prepare for conditions that would overwhelm the unprepared. The principle is straightforward. You expose yourself to manageable versions of the challenges you want to be resilient against in controlled conditions where you can maintain quality performance. Then you progressively increase the intensity as your capacity grows. For most people, this begins with small, daily, voluntary discomforts. taking cold showers, not for some physiological benefit, but for the mental training of choosing discomfort deliberately and remaining calm within it. Exercising past the point of comfort. Having the conversation you've been avoiding. Starting the project you've been circling. The specifics matter less than the pattern. What you are training is the neurological response to discomfort itself. The ability to feel the discomfort signal without immediately routing around it. To stay present within the difficulty. To keep functioning. Cognitive resilience. Building takes this principle into the domain of mental and social challenges. You deliberately place yourself in situations that stretch your mental and emotional comfort zone. A high-stakes presentation to a group larger than you're comfortable with. A conversation where you voice genuine disagreement instead of accommodating to avoid tension. A project that demands capabilities you haven't yet fully developed. Each of these stretches challenges you at the level where growth actually happens. The crucial element is maintaining deliberate, conscious control over your mental state during these challenges. Not suppressing the discomfort. That doesn't work and isn't the goal. But choosing how you respond to it. Practicing deliberate calm. Practicing the move from automatic emotional reaction to chosen strategic response. Negative visualization is an ancient Stoic practice with powerful modern neuroscientific support, and it is one of the most underused resilience tools available. Regularly and deliberately, you imagine in detail how you would handle significant setbacks. The project fails. The relationship ends. The opportunity doesn't come. The health crisis arrives. You walk through these scenarios vividly, experiencing them mentally and practicing your response. This is not pessimism. It is strategic preparation. It accomplishes two things simultaneously. First, it makes potential setbacks feel less catastrophically unexpected. Your brain has already processed the scenario and identified a path forward. Second, it produces a genuine psychological benefit documented by multiple researchers. People who engage in negative visualization consistently report higher levels of gratitude, focus, and present moment engagement because they've reminded themselves that what they have now is not guaranteed. When difficulty actually arrives, and it will, a brain that has already mentally rehearsed encountering and navigating difficulty responds with resourcefulness rather than shock. Emotional regulation training is the fourth pillar of mental resilience, and it addresses one of the most impactful but least discussed performance variables. Your emotional state determines the quality of everything you do. Your ability to focus, make decisions, communicate effectively, and persist through obstacles is all filtered through your emotional operating environment. An emotionally regulated mind performs at fundamentally higher levels than an emotionally reactive one, regardless of skill, knowledge, or raw capability. The foundational insight of emotional regulation is that emotions are not caused by events. They are caused by your interpretation of events. Two people can experience the identical situation and have completely different emotional responses based solely on the story they tell about what is happening. This means you have more influence over your emotional experience than it feels like in the moment. The reframing technique is the most practical application of this insight. When a challenging situation activates a strong emotional response, you pause and deliberately examine the interpretation your brain has generated. Then you consciously choose a more empowering interpretation, not a denial of difficulty, but a different angle from which the difficulty appears genuinely manageable. This setback is not a sign that I'm on the wrong path. It's information about how to navigate the path better. This person's criticism is not an attack. It's data I can evaluate and use or discard. This situation didn't happen to me. It happened, and I choose how to engage with it. Practice consistently, this reframing becomes increasingly automatic. Your brain begins to generate more empowering interpretations as a default rather than as a deliberate override. Recovery. Protocols complete the resilience architecture. Resilience without recovery is just wearing down. The building of mental toughness requires the same cyclical structure as the building of physical strength. Deliberate challenge, followed by adequate recovery, followed by greater challenge. Active recovery, light movement, creative activity, genuine social connection, restores mental energy while keeping you in motion. Passive recovery, high-quality sleep, stillness, meditation, time in nature, allows deeper neurological restoration. The sophistication lies in monitoring. Elite performers don't just work hard and hope for the best. They track their recovery as carefully as their output, watching for early signs of depletion and intervening before performance degradation becomes significant. The persistence protocol. Staying in the game. Until you win, the most common cause of failure is not a flawed plan, inadequate resources, or insufficient talent. It is quitting one move before the breakthrough. Persistence. The ability to maintain commitment through setbacks, delays, plateaus, and the grinding middle periods that no motivational video ever shows you, is the single most predictive variable in extraordinary long-term outcomes. More predictive than intelligence. More predictive than opportunity. More predictive than any natural gift. But let's be precise about what persistence actually is, because the popular version of it is not only inaccurate, it's actively harmful. Persistence is not suffering indefinitely. It is not white-knuckling through the same approach long after evidence suggests it isn't working. That's not persistence. That's stubbornness, and it's wasteful. True persistence is intelligent stubbornness, an unbreakable commitment to your ultimate objective combined with complete flexibility about your methods. You never give up on what you want. You continuously experiment with how you'll achieve it. The distinction matters profoundly. People who confuse persistence with rigidity get stuck doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different results. People who practice intelligent stubbornness stay in the game while continuously evolving their approach, which means they eventually find what works. Outcome. Independence is the psychological foundation of sustainable persistence. It means detaching your emotional state from short-term results while maintaining total commitment to long-term success. When you are outcome independent, a poor result this week doesn't indicate that you should stop. It indicates that you need more information, a different approach, or simply more time in the process. The setback doesn't carry existential weight. It carries information. This stance is not passive. It is not resignation. It is a specific psychological orientation that allows you to maintain consistent effort, regardless of whether you're winning in the moment, because your motivation comes from the process itself, rather than from the validation of external outcomes. Setback. Reframing is the operational practice of outcome independence. Every failure, every rejection, every result that doesn't match expectation, you treat it as experimental data. This language matters. An experiment that produced unexpected results is categorically different from a failure that reveals your inadequacy. Same event, completely different meaning, completely different behavioral response. When setbacks are data, you ask data questions. What does this tell me about what doesn't work? What would I do differently on the next iteration? What assumption did I hold that this result challenges? This mental orientation keeps you moving. You don't pause to grieve the experiment. You adjust and run the next one. Minimum viable persistence addresses one of the most practically important aspects of staying in the game over extended periods. what you do when your motivation is completely exhausted. During the genuinely difficult stretches, the plateaus, the setbacks, the periods when every reasonable part of your mind is questioning whether this is worth it, the all-or-nothing thinking that causes quitting usually sounds like, "I can't do this the right way right now, so I'll just stop and restart when I'm in a better state." Minimum viable persistence replaces this with, "What is the smallest action I can take today that keeps me in forward motion? One paragraph instead of a chapter, one phone call instead of a full day of outreach, one set instead of a full workout, 10 minutes on the project instead of the deep session you'd planned." The specific output matters far less than the identity maintenance. You are keeping alive the pattern of a person who persists. Every day you take the minimum viable action, you preserve the thread. And preserving the thread is everything, because the thread leads to the breakthrough, and without it, the breakthrough never comes. Strategic patience is the cognitive framework for the long stretches when results haven't appeared yet. But you're doing the right things. The key insight is the distinction between leading indicators and lagging indicators. Lagging indicators are the final outcomes you're working toward: the revenue, the physical transformation, the published work, the recognized achievement. These are the results, and they characteristically appear long after the actions that created them. Leading indicators are the process markers, the signals that you are moving in the right direction even before the final results emerge. Growing skills, deepening understanding, expanding networks, improving systems, accumulating evidence that the approach is sound and the capability is developing. When you're navigating through a difficult plateau, stop measuring progress by lagging indicators and start measuring by leading indicators. Am I becoming more capable? Is my approach improving? Am I accumulating the capabilities that will eventually produce the outcome? If yes, you are not failing. You are in the process. Stay in it. Compound. Persistence is the final concept in this chapter, and it is perhaps the most motivating. The returns on persistence are not linear. They are compound. And the most disproportionate returns come during the periods when others are quitting. When the field thins out, when the difficulty of the challenge eliminates everyone who wasn't committed enough to stay, the gap between those still in motion and the rest of the world becomes exponential. Your persistent effort during others' absence doesn't just continue your progress, it accelerates it. Every difficult period you stay through becomes a competitive moat. Every breakthrough you reach by refusing to quit while others stopped creates advantages that cannot be replicated by people who didn't pay that price. The hardest part of the journey is always the part just before it gets easier, and the people who change their lives most profoundly are almost universally the ones who stayed in the game just long enough to discover that. Advanced mental programming. Dismantling your hidden ceilings. You have built discipline. You have established habits. You can handle significant challenges without breaking. Now comes the work that most people never get to, because most people never get this far. Advanced mental programming targets the deepest layer of your operating system, the foundational beliefs that place invisible ceilings on what you allow yourself to pursue, achieve, or even imagine. These are not the obvious limitations you can see and address consciously. They are the beliefs operating below awareness, quietly shaping every decision, directing every behavior, determining what you reach for and what you deflect before it ever reaches your conscious consideration. You can be doing everything right on the surface and still find yourself mysteriously hitting walls at consistent levels, advancing to a certain point in your career and somehow not going further, building toward a goal and unconsciously creating the circumstances that prevent its completion. working incredibly hard, and yet finding that the outcomes never quite match the effort. This is invisible ceiling syndrome, and it is powered entirely by programming installed before you had any choice in the matter. Identity-based limitations are the first category to address. Your sense of self acts as a governor on your behavior, a regulator that automatically limits your actions to remain consistent with who you believe yourself to be. If your deepest identity contains the belief that you are someone who struggles, who doesn't quite make it, who is not the kind of person who achieves at that level, your behavior will conform to that identity with extraordinary reliability. This is not motivational language. This is documented psychological behavior. The drive for self-consistency is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Your brain actively seeks to confirm its existing narrative about who you are. The programming process requires two simultaneous moves, acting contrary to the limiting identity even when it feels false, and feeding your mind evidence of a new identity taking shape. Every action you take that contradicts your old self-story is a deposit into the account of your new identity. Accumulated consistently over months, these deposits create a genuinely new relationship with who you are. Discomfort. Reconditioning is the second level of advanced programming, and it addresses something more fundamental than simply tolerating difficulty. Most people have been conditioned by education, culture, and experience to interpret discomfort as a stop sign. Pain equals wrong direction. Struggle equals inadequacy. Anxiety equals danger. Elite performers have been reconditioned to interpret those same signals as directional information of a completely different kind. Discomfort means growth is happening. Struggle means you are at the edge of your current capability, precisely where development occurs. Anxiety often means something genuinely important is on the line. The neurotechnology for this reconditioning involves specific breathwork techniques, visualization protocols, and cognitive reframing practices applied consistently during challenging experiences over time. Your nervous system gradually learns a new association, challenge to growth signal to lean in. Eventually, the sensation that used to trigger retreat begins to trigger something closer to activation. This is not a metaphor. The neurological pathway changes. Limiting belief. Dismantling is the third level, and it requires honest, specific inventory. Your limiting beliefs about what's possible for someone like you are not abstract philosophical positions. They are specific, often concrete narratives that have been reinforced by your social environment, your past experiences, and your selective attention to confirming evidence. People from my background don't reach that level. I've never been the kind of person who could maintain that discipline. I don't have the connections or resources that would make that possible. That kind of success is for a different type of person. These beliefs sound reasonable. That's what makes them so effective at containing you. They are disguised as realistic self-assessment when they are actually learned helplessness, a conditioned response to perceived impossibility that causes you to stop pursuing outcomes before you've tested whether they're actually out of reach. Dismantling them requires three elements: exposure to evidence that contradicts them, consistent action that makes sense only if they are false, and deliberate attention to the growing record of your own contradictions of these beliefs. Anti-fragility development is the fourth level, and it represents a fundamental reorientation towards setbacks. Most resilience training aims to make you resistant to failure, able to endure it without breaking. Anti-fragility goes further. It aims to make you stronger because of failure, not despite setbacks, but through them. Every difficult experience, properly processed, deposits capability that would not exist without that experience. The specific strength that comes from navigating a particular type of adversity is only available through that adversity. You cannot acquire it another way. When this is your relationship with difficulty, you stop merely tolerating setbacks and start extracting maximum value from them. Every failure becomes a capability deposit. Every painful period becomes a capability that will serve you in ways a smooth path never could. Struggle. Reevaluation is the fifth level, addressing your deepest beliefs about what it means to have to work hard for something. Many people carry an implicit belief, often installed early in life, that needing to struggle with something means they're not naturally suited for it. That people who are truly gifted make things look easy. This belief causes enormous damage because it frames the experience of genuine effort as evidence of unsuitability. Elite performers have arrived at the opposite framework. Struggle is not the signal that you're on the wrong path. Struggle is the signal that you are on a path worth taking, that the challenge is significant enough to require your full capacity. Retraining yourself to derive genuine satisfaction from the process of struggling with hard things, rather than only from resolving the struggle, creates a fundamentally different relationship with the most challenging phases of any meaningful pursuit. Internal validation architecture is the final level of advanced programming, and it addresses the dependency on external approval that silently governs most people's behavior. The need for external validation, for recognition, approval, and confirmation from others is not weakness. It is built into human psychology. We are profoundly social animals, and our brains are wired to seek social confirmation. The problem is not the drive. The problem is the dependency, allowing your direction and motivation to be primarily governed by how others respond to what you're doing. When external validation is the primary source of your drive, you are functionally dependent on conditions outside your control. You pursue goals that look impressive rather than goals that are genuinely meaningful to you. You shrink from unconventional paths because they don't generate immediate social approval. You abandon worthy pursuits the moment the positive feedback stops arriving. Building internal validation architecture means developing a clear, specific, personally meaningful standard of excellence that you are accountable to, independent of whether anyone else sees it, acknowledges it, or applauds it. This is intrinsic motivation at its deepest level, and it is the most sustainable, most powerful fuel source for long-term extraordinary performance. Elite performance protocols, operating at maximum human capacity. The top performers in any field, athletes, founders, artists, scientists, leaders, are not simply working harder than everyone else. They are operating their entire biological and psychological system at a level most people never access. This chapter is about the architecture of elite performance, not motivation, not discipline. The actual protocols that allow human beings to consistently output at levels that, from the outside, seem impossible. The first and most foundational truth of elite performance is this: your brain and body are a single integrated system, and optimizing one without attending to the other leaves enormous potential permanently unrealized. The physical infrastructure, sleep quality, nutritional strategy, movement practices, stress management, directly determines the ceiling of your cognitive and psychological performance. A brilliant strategy executed by a brain running on inadequate sleep and poor nutritional inputs will produce results far below what that same strategy, executed by a properly resourced brain, could produce. Elite performers treat their physical maintenance as performance infrastructure, not lifestyle preference. They are not health enthusiasts. They are performance engineers. Cognitive stress and recovery cycles are the first elite performance protocol. Your brain, like any high-performance system, becomes stronger through cycles of appropriate stress followed by adequate recovery. The key word is appropriate, not maximum, not constant. calibrated to be challenging enough to stimulate adaptation without overwhelming recovery capacity. Most people either never challenge their cognitive capacity meaningfully, drifting through days of reactive, low-difficulty work, or challenge it constantly without building in recovery. Both patterns produce stagnation or breakdown. Elite cognitive training involves deliberately engaging in work that is genuinely demanding at the level of your current capability. Complex creative problems, demanding strategic thinking, skill acquisition at the edge of competence, followed by periods of genuine cognitive rest that allow adaptation to consolidate. The calibration is personal and dynamic. Your optimal challenge level today is different from what it will be in 6 months as your capacity grows. Developing the self-monitoring sophistication to maintain optimal challenge throughout your growth trajectory is itself an advanced skill. Sustained selective attention training is the second elite protocol. Most people's attention is reactive and scattered, pulled moment to moment by whatever is most stimulating in their immediate environment. Elite performers have developed what neuroscientists call sustained selective attention, the ability to hold intense, deliberate focus on chosen targets while actively filtering out everything else. This is not a passive quality. It is an active skill developed through specific practices, dual task protocols, maintaining primary focus while managing secondary demands, distraction resistance training, deliberate exposure to interruptions while practicing maintained concentration, attention switching drills, rapid clean transitions between different focus targets without losing efficiency. These training protocols build the actual neural infrastructure for elite focus. They are not metaphors. They produce measurable changes in attention-related brain regions. Creative flexibility training is the third protocol, addressing the cognitive rigidity that develops when you consistently solve similar problems using familiar approaches. Elite creative performance requires a brain that has been regularly challenged to think in genuinely novel ways. Confronted with problems that don't have obvious solutions, with domains outside its area of existing expertise, with constraints that prevent the use of habitual approaches, constraint-based exercises are particularly powerful. Artificially limit your available resources, your time window, or your permitted methods, and your brain is forced to generate more innovative solutions than it would produce with unconstrained resources. The constraint creates creative necessity. Energy architecture is the fourth protocol, and it is about far more than time management. Elite performance requires sophisticated awareness of your energy state, physical, mental, and emotional, throughout different periods and activities. Not just tracking your schedule, but tracking your capacity to execute at high levels within that schedule. Elite performers know when they are at peak capacity and protect those windows with the same intensity that elite athletes protect training sessions. They know when recovery is required and enforce it rather than pushing through depletion into breakdown. They manage the overall energy architecture of their weeks and months with the same strategic intentionality they apply to their most important work. Pressure decision training is the fifth protocol, and it addresses one of the most important and least trained performance skills, making high-quality decisions quickly, under pressure, with incomplete information. This capacity separates elite performers from everyone else in the moments that matter most. Normal decision-making processes that involve thorough analysis and deliberate reflection become impossible when time is compressed and stakes are high. Elite performers train specifically for this condition, progressively challenging decision scenarios under artificial time pressure, with real stakes and consequences for poor choices. What develops is not just faster decisions. It is the specific neural architecture for decision confidence under uncertainty, the ability to reach decisive clarity quickly without becoming paralyzed by the fear of imperfect information. Competitive mindset cultivation is the sixth protocol, the specific psychological state that allows elite performers to access their highest capabilities precisely when the pressure is greatest. This state is trained through regular exposure to high-stakes, competitive conditions where performance directly affects outcomes that genuinely matter. You cannot train competitive mindset in low-stakes environments. The nervous system must regularly experience real consequence to develop the neurological patterns that transform pressure into fuel rather than interference. Visualization protocols complement this physical training. Mentally rehearsing your peak performance under specific high-pressure scenarios with the same vividness and emotional engagement we discussed in Chapter 5. Your brain develops neurological familiarity with performing under pressure, making the reality of high-stakes performance feel more like familiar territory and less like a threatening emergency. Pressure mastery, thriving when stakes are highest. Every training technique in this book will eventually be tested in the same place. Not in the quiet morning when conditions are perfect and your coffee is hot and your motivation is high. In the moments when everything is on the line, time is compressed, and failure carries real consequences. This is where most people's carefully built systems fail them, and it is exactly where the people who achieve extraordinary things prove themselves. Pressure has a unique quality that separates it from ordinary difficulty. It does not just make existing challenges harder. It fundamentally changes how your brain operates. Under significant pressure, your nervous system shifts into survival mode, flooding your body with stress hormones that narrow your thinking, impair creative problem solving, reduce access to complex reasoning, and create tunnel vision. The sophisticated techniques that work perfectly during practice sessions crumble in real high-stakes situations because your brain is no longer operating from the same neurological state in which those techniques were learned. Elite performers have not eliminated this response. They have trained it. They have built a different neurological relationship with pressure, one in which the very signals that trigger breakdown in most people instead trigger enhanced performance. Stress inoculation at the pressure level is the foundational protocol. You cannot prepare for high-pressure performance in low-pressure training environments. The nervous system adaptation required only occurs through actual exposure to real consequence. This means deliberately, progressively placing yourself in situations that create genuine pressure and practicing maintaining performance quality despite that pressure. Speaking to progressively larger audiences, competing in progressively higher stakes environments, taking on projects where the consequences of underperformance are real and visible. The key, and this is critical, is maintaining quality performance during these exposures. If you consistently perform poorly under pressure, you train your nervous system to associate pressure with performance degradation. If you consistently maintain quality despite pressure, you train the opposite association. This is why elite performers do not wait for important moments to perform under pressure. They deliberately manufacture pressure in training so the real moments feel familiar. Pressure reframing is the second protocol, and it addresses a neurobiological reality that most people don't know about. The physiological experience of intense pressure and the physiological experience of excitement are nearly identical. Elevated heart rate, increased adrenaline, heightened alertness and sensory acuity. The biology is the same. The difference is entirely in the meaning your brain assigns to these sensations. When your brain labels them as threat, you experience anxiety that impairs performance. When your brain labels them as excitement and activation, those same sensations enhance performance. The reframing practice is specific and consistent. Every time you notice the physical sensations of pressure, you deliberately choose the more empowering interpretation. My heart is racing. I am activated and ready. I feel tense before this presentation. My body is preparing me to perform. I'm nervous about this conversation. I care about getting this right, and that's appropriate. This is not a trick or positive self-deception. It is a neurologically accurate reinterpretation that accesses the genuine performance-enhancing properties of a high arousal state. Task fixation. Under pressure is the third protocol, the ability to become completely absorbed in executing the critical actions required, regardless of the surrounding chaos. When the stakes are highest, the most dangerous thing your brain can do is focus on the magnitude of the consequences. The bigger the moment feels, the more your brain is drawn toward thinking about what failure means, which is precisely the opposite of where your attention needs to be. Task fixation training involves practicing the deliberate, rapid move of attention from consequence to action, from what this means if I fail to what the next specific action is. This mental redirect, practiced under escalating pressure, becomes an automatic response. Special operations personnel, emergency physicians, and elite athletes across disciplines use variants of this same practice. The skill is universal because the neurological challenge is universal. Pressure recovery is the fourth and final protocol in this chapter. The underappreciated capacity to return to baseline quickly after high-pressure situations. Many people can perform adequately in individual high-stakes moments, but require extended recovery afterward. In a world where pressure situations arrive in clusters and sequences rather than single isolated events, the ability to recover rapidly and return to full capacity is a significant performance advantage. Pressure recovery training involves specific physiological down-regulation techniques, controlled breathing patterns, brief physical movement, specific attentional redirects that actively accelerate the transition from high arousal survival mode back to clear, resourceful, high-capacity thinking. The goal is not to avoid the high arousal state. It is to be able to return from it efficiently so that consecutive pressure situations don't produce cumulative degradation. Sustainable excellence, making peak performance. Your permanent standard. Most people think about peak performance as a sprint. They summon extraordinary effort for a defined period. They push harder than they've ever pushed. They achieve something impressive. And then, inevitably, they exhaust themselves and fall back, sometimes below their starting point, before the cycle begins again. This is intensity-based performance. It is real. It sometimes produces significant results, and it is ultimately unsustainable. The harder you push without structural support, the bigger the crash when the energy runs out. Elite performers think about peak performance as a permanent operating standard, a baseline from which they continuously grow, rather than an exceptional state they occasionally access. This requires a fundamentally different architecture for how performance is generated and maintained. The first shift is from intensity-based performance to systems-based performance. Instead of trying to generate extraordinary effort through motivation and willpower, you build environmental, psychological, and behavioral structures that naturally produce high-level performance without requiring heroic effort. The system does the work that effort used to do. You don't have to manufacture the will to produce. The design of your environment, schedule, habits, and social context produces it automatically. Adaptive competence is the first component of sustainable excellence. This is the ability to continuously evolve your skills and approaches rather than relying on methods that worked in the past. Most people plateau because they stop learning at the frontier of their capability. They become proficient at a certain level and then execute at that level repeatedly, which feels productive but is actually stagnation dressed as consistency. Adaptive competence requires deliberate, regular exposure to challenges at and beyond your current edge. situations where your existing approach is insufficient and you are forced to develop new capabilities. This is uncomfortable by design. Growth at the frontier always is. It also requires developing meta-learning capacity, not just learning new things, but learning how to learn more effectively in any domain. The ability to pick up new capabilities rapidly is itself one of the most valuable capabilities in a world that changes as fast as ours does. Sustainable intensity is the second component, not maximum output. Optimal output maintained consistently over time without periodic breakdown. The key skill is sophisticated self-monitoring, tracking your energy, motivation, and performance quality across time with enough precision to recognize early depletion signals before they become performance breakdowns. Most people operate with a binary awareness of their state, fine or exhausted. Sustainable excellence requires a more granular monitoring system. You are learning to read the early subtle signals that your performance infrastructure is under strain and responding with appropriate recovery before the strain becomes visible in your outputs. This also means developing multiple performance modalities. When your primary cognitive approach is depleted, you can shift to alternative ways of doing valuable work, more physical tasks, more collaborative modes, more administrative functions that maintain productive output while allowing your primary system to recover. Intrinsic motivation. Cultivation is the third component, and we've touched on it throughout this book because it is absolutely foundational to long-term performance. The most powerful and sustainable motivational systems are those rooted in personal meaning, deep values, and genuine love for the process itself, not in external recognition, competitive comparison, or conditional approval. External motivators are effective in the short term and brittle over time. They disappear when the recognition stops, when the competition changes, when the goal is achieved and the next one hasn't been set. Intrinsic motivation is self-regenerating. The better you get, the more interesting the next level becomes. Developing this requires connecting your daily work to layers of meaning that are genuinely yours, not the meaning someone else assigned to the goal, but the specific ways this pursuit aligns with what you actually value about living. Compound improvement systems are the fourth component, approaches that produce accelerating rather than linear returns on your development efforts. You achieve this by focusing investment on capabilities that amplify all other capabilities. Improved pattern recognition makes you better at everything that requires identifying patterns. Emotional regulation improvement enhances every interaction, every decision, every high-stakes performance. Physical vitality improvements amplify the quality and duration of all cognitive work. These foundational capabilities produce compound returns because they operate across all other areas of your performance simultaneously. Legacy building is the final component of sustainable excellence, and it is the one that provides the deepest motivational fuel for the very long run. At some point in your development, the most powerful source of drive is no longer personal achievement. It is impact. The specific, meaningful ways your capabilities and efforts create value for people and purposes beyond yourself. This is not a soft or abstract concept. It is a practical performance amplifier. People working toward meaningful legacies sustain higher effort over longer periods, make more generous decisions that create collaborative advantages, and continue growing long after purely personal motivations would have plateaued. What do you want to have built, contributed, or created that will matter to others? The answer to that question, held clearly and revisited regularly, provides a motivational depth that sustains extraordinary performance through every difficulty the journey produces. The complete transformation, becoming unstoppable. You have arrived at the final chapter with a complete framework. You understand the neuroscience of why you resist hard things and how to systematically override that resistance. You have the architecture for building an environment that works for you rather than against you. You have the mental leverage techniques that multiply your psychological effectiveness. You have the habit systems, the resilience protocols, the execution architecture, the focus training, the pressure mastery skills, and the sustainable excellence framework. You know what to do, which means the only remaining question, the only one that has ever actually mattered, is whether you are going to do it. Because here is the truth that every word of this audiobook has been building toward. Information does not change lives. Decisions do. Specifically, one particular kind of decision, the kind you make not as a promise to try something new, but as a declaration that you are no longer the same person you were before you made it. This is not hyperbole. This is neuroscience. Your brain does not reorganize around information. It reorganizes around new behaviors repeated with sufficient consistency and intensity to forge new neural pathways, and those behaviors do not emerge from knowing better. They emerge from deciding to become someone different, and then acting in alignment with that decision before you feel ready, before you feel confident, before you have proof it will work. The complete transformation happens in 5 stages, and it is important that you understand all of them so that you recognize where you are when you arrive there. Stage 1, the break point. This is the moment when the cost of staying the same finally exceeds the cost of changing. When you see with absolute clarity what your current patterns are producing, not just in some abstract future, but in the specific shape of your actual daily life, and you find that outcome genuinely unacceptable. This is not a comfortable moment, but it is an essential one. Every extraordinary transformation in human history begins with a clear-eyed confrontation with what is, not what could be, what is, and the decision that it is not enough. At this moment, change stops being something you are trying to add to your life. It becomes something you are no longer willing to live without. Stage 2, identity integration. You begin acting in alignment with your chosen new identity, even when it feels uncomfortable, unnatural, or contradicted by the evidence of who you have been. This stage is hard because you are building an identity without yet having the proof that it's real. Every time you act in alignment with the person you are choosing to become, you make one deposit into the account of that new identity. You don't yet feel like that person. You are choosing to act like them anyway. This requires what I call behavioral integrity, doing what you committed to doing, when you committed to doing it, regardless of how you feel in the moment, not because it's easy, because it is the specific, non-negotiable behavior that builds self-trust at the deepest level. And self-trust is the foundation of every other capability in this book. Stage 3, automatic excellence. Over months of consistent behavioral integrity, the patterns you have been deliberately building begin to run automatically. You no longer need to summon will to do the hard thing. The hard thing has become your default. It is what you do because of who you now are. At this stage, the mental energy previously consumed by resistance becomes available for something else. You are no longer spending your best hours fighting yourself. You are using your full capacity to create, build, and engage with the world at levels that weren't accessible before. Stage 4, exponential growth. The compound effect of transformation becomes visible. Each capability you have built serves as the foundation for the next level of development. Growth accelerates. The things that once required maximum effort become manageable with focused attention. The ceiling that seemed fixed begins to look like a floor. This is when other people start to notice. When the results become visible, not just to you but to the world. When what you've been building privately begins to emerge publicly. Stage 5. Continuous evolution. At this stage, transformation is no longer something you are pursuing. It is who you are. The drive to grow, improve, and push further has become self-sustaining and self-renewing. You no longer need external motivation because you have become genuinely addicted to the process of growth itself. Each new capability opens a view of the next frontier. Each mastered challenge reveals a more interesting challenge beyond it. The journey does not end. It deepens. This is the state that the world's most extraordinary performers share. Not that they have arrived at a destination, but that they have become the kind of person who is always in purposeful motion toward the next worthy challenge. Here is what I need you to understand before we close. Everything in this audiobook, every framework, every protocol, every technique, will produce exactly 0 results without implementation. The most sophisticated knowledge in the world is worthless in a life where it is never applied. You have listened this far. You have already done something most people won't do. You have invested your attention in understanding the actual architecture of extraordinary performance. Now, the only thing left is the decision, not the decision to try. Trying is how you hedge against the discomfort of full commitment, not the decision to see how it goes. That's another hedge. The decision to become someone entirely different than the person who pressed play on this audiobook. The old version of you, the one who negotiated with resistance, who deferred the hard things, who relied on motivation that never stayed long enough. That person's time is done. The person you are choosing to become does hard things not because they are easy, not because they always feel motivated, not because the path is clear, but because that is simply who they are. Your brain is ready to be reprogrammed. The architecture is waiting to be installed. The system is designed and proven and available to you. The only missing piece is you. Everything you want is on the other side of the hard things you've been avoiding. Now you know exactly how to go there. Go.